The stars shimmered against the darkness of space as another battle raged in the distant Orion Arm. Flashes of light marked the deaths of thousands, yet this was just another day in a war that had lasted 300 years. The Bright Ones, creatures of living crystal, fought with ships that looked like diamonds cut by a mad god. Their vessels moved in perfect formations, each one reflecting and amplifying the power of their light-based weapons. Against them, the cloud-collected ships looked like bottles of storm clouds, their gaseous forms shifting and changing as they launched attack after attack. Commander Stone of the Bright Ones watched from his command ship as another squadron of his forces engaged the enemy. His crystalline body sparkled with frustration. This battle was like all the others before it. They would win some ground, lose some ground, and in the end, nothing would really change. The war had started when he was just a young crystal, barely formed, over a simple dispute about mining rights in the energy-rich nebulae that both species needed to survive. Across the battlefield, Fleet Director Mist of the Cloud Collective observed with equal weariness. Her gaseous form swirled with shades of gray and purple as she processed the latest battle reports. They had lost 3 more colony clouds in the last attack, but had managed to destroy 5 crystal cities of the Bright Ones. An equal trade as always. The Cloud Collective had long since forgotten how to measure victories. They only counted losses now. The war had changed everything. Smaller alien races that lived in the space between the two powers had been forced to pick sides. The plant-like cedars had joined the Bright Ones, their organic photosynthesis technology matching well with crystal-based light weapons. The silicon-based rock shells had sided with the Cloud Collective, their heavy mineral ships providing perfect platforms for the gaseous warriors to launch their attacks from. On a small trading outpost near the edge of the war zone, a merchant named Grax counted his profits. The war had made him rich. Both sides needed supplies, and he was happy to sell to anyone who could pay. He had seen 3 generations of his species grow up during this war, and he expected his great-grandchildren would see it still raging. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he watched another supply ship dock at his station. This one carried medical supplies for treating crystalline injuries. He would sell them to the Bright Ones at 10 times the normal price. Back in the main battle, Commander Stone's forces had surrounded a key Cloud Collective position. His ships formed a perfect sphere around the gaseous ships, their crystal hulls gleaming as they prepared to fire. But just as victory seemed certain, more Cloud Collective vessels appeared from within a nearby nebula, their forms crackling with absorbed energy. The pattern repeated as it had countless times before. Neither side could ever gain a real advantage. The war had become more than just a fight over resources. It had become a way of life. Young Bright Ones were formed and shaped for combat, their crystal structures deliberately grown to make them better warriors. The Cloud Collective had evolved, their gaseous forms becoming naturally more volatile, better suited for the weapons they wielded. Both civilizations had forgotten what peace felt like. In the space between battles, automated probes from both sides continued their endless dance. They searched for advantages, for weaknesses, for anything that might break the stalemate. They had mapped every star, every planet, every asteroid in their section of the galaxy. But they never ventured toward one particular spiral arm, where a young race was just beginning to look up at the stars with serious interest. The day's battle ended like all the others, with both sides claiming victory while nursing their wounds. Commander Stone reformed his damaged crystal arm, the fractures slowly healing as he absorbed light from his ship's medical bay. Fleet Director Mist dispersed herself through her flagship's gas chambers, allowing her damaged particles to be replenished with fresh matter. In their respective command centers, both leaders looked at the same star maps, planned the same strategies, and hoped for the same thing: a way to end this endless war. But neither could imagine that the solution would come from a direction none of them had considered, from a species that neither side had noticed yet. As they prepared for another day of the same war, humanity was about to change everything. They just didn't know it yet. The Deep Space Telescope Array on Europa picked up the first signs on a quiet Tuesday morning. Tom Baker was halfway through his coffee when the readings appeared on his screen. At first, he thought the equipment was malfunctioning. The energy signatures were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They were massive, far too organized to be natural, and definitely artificial. Within hours, the United Earth government's top scientists gathered in the underground command center beneath New Geneva. The room hummed with nervous energy as Admiral White studied the holographic display of the anomalous readings. The energy signatures showed weapons fire powerful enough to crack planets and shield technologies that could contain the force of a small sun. "We need eyes out there," the Admiral said, her weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the hologram. "But we do this quietly. If there's a war going on out there, we don't want either side knowing we're watching." The room full of military leaders and scientists nodded in agreement. Earth had spent the last 50 years developing stealth technology for their ships. Now it would be put to the ultimate test. The scout ship Silent Arrow departed Earth orbit that night, its experimental dark matter drive leaving no trace of its passage. Captain James Reynolds and his crew of 12 had trained for first contact scenarios, but nothing had prepared them for what they found at the edge of human space. Through the ship's advanced sensors, they watched a battle that defied imagination. Living crystal ships, each the size of a small city, fired beams of concentrated light that could slice through space itself. Against them, ships made of living gas changed their form like storm clouds, absorbing and redirecting energy in ways that human physics was only beginning to understand. The crew watched in stunned silence as these giants fought their endless battle. "Record everything," Reynolds ordered, his voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that no one could possibly hear them. "Every weapon signature, every shield frequency, every tactic." The ship's AI compiled the data as they observed, building detailed profiles of both sides' capabilities. What they found was both terrifying and fascinating. The crystalline beings, which the crew nicknamed the Bright Ones, had technology based on light and crystal matrices. Their ships weren't built. They were grown, living vessels that could repair themselves by absorbing solar energy. But during the battles, Reynolds noticed something crucial. Their crystal formations had natural frequencies that could be disrupted. The gaseous species, which they called the Cloud Collective, was equally impressive. They could transform their ships into living weapons, dispersing and reforming at will. Yet the human observers noticed that they relied heavily on gravitational fields to maintain their cohesion. It was a weakness, but one that no one had been able to exploit. Until now. Back on Earth, the data streamed in through quantum channels, and the greatest minds of humanity worked to understand what they were seeing. In labs across the planet, scientists and engineers began to develop new theories and technologies based on their observations. They weren't just learning about the war, they were finding ways to end it. 3 months into the observation mission, the Silent Arrow made a discovery that changed everything. They found the wreckage of a battle, debris from both sides scattered across an asteroid field. Using robotic drones, they collected samples, actual pieces of crystal technology and containment fields, still holding traces of the gaseous beings. This physical evidence would prove crucial in developing humanity's response to the conflict. As the Silent Arrow prepared to return home, Captain Reynolds took one last look at the battlefield through the ship's viewport. Out there, 2 mighty civilizations were locked in an endless war, each believing they were invincible against the other. Neither side could possibly imagine that their conflict was being watched by a younger race, one that could see what they could not, a way to break their eternal stalemate. The ship turned toward Earth, carrying with it the knowledge that would change the course of not just one civilization, but 3. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, and it wasn't as another soldier in an endless war. It was as the peacemaker no one expected. They just had to figure out how to do the impossible, end a 300-year-old war in a matter of hours. The research labs beneath Mount Wilson buzzed with activity as scientists studied the alien samples brought back by the Silent Arrow. Dr. Anna Miller held up a crystal shard to the light, watching as it sparkled with its own inner energy. Even after being separated from its parent ship for months, the crystal was still alive in its own way, responding to different frequencies of light that the research team exposed it to. In the next lab over, Dr. Robert Cooper worked with the containment field holding traces of the cloud collective's gaseous matter. The floating particles seemed to dance inside the electromagnetic bubble, trying to maintain the patterns they had been programmed with centuries ago. Every test revealed new secrets about how these beings existed and fought. "Look at this," Anna called out, pointing to her screen. She had discovered that certain electromagnetic frequencies made the crystal sample vibrate in unusual ways. When she hit exactly the right frequency, the crystal's internal structure became temporarily chaotic, its normal geometric patterns breaking down. "We could disrupt their entire nervous system with this." The United Earth government had authorized 5 more stealth ships to join the observation mission. Each one was positioned at different points around the war zone, gathering data on fleet movements, battle tactics, and most importantly, the day-to-day behavior of both species. The humans learned that despite their alien nature, both sides had familiar patterns. They had supply lines, they needed rest, and they made mistakes when they were tired. Captain Reynolds, now commanding the expanded observation fleet, watched through his ship's cameras as a Bright One's crystal city rebuilt itself after a battle. The process was beautiful but slow, taking precious resources that were becoming harder to find after centuries of war. On the other side of the conflict, he observed cloud collective colonies struggling to maintain their form in areas where their gravitational generators had been damaged. "They're both exhausted," he reported back to Earth. "They're fighting because they don't know how to stop anymore. Their weapons can destroy planets, but they can't destroy each other completely. They're too evenly matched." In a secure facility under the Pacific Ocean, military strategists ran simulation after simulation using the data collected from the observations. They discovered that both species had become so focused on countering each other's strengths that they had left themselves open to attacks that neither side had considered possible. The cloud collective's reliance on gravity could be turned against them with the right technology. The Bright One's crystalline nature made them vulnerable to frequencies they had never thought to defend against. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Miller had been running tests on different combinations of frequencies when she accidentally created a harmonic resonance that completely paralyzed the crystal sample without damaging it. At the same time, Dr. Cooper found a way to use focused gravitational pulses to temporarily disrupt the cloud collective's ability to maintain their form without causing permanent harm. "We can stop them both," Admiral White said during the emergency meeting called to discuss these discoveries. "Not just one side or the other. We can shut down their ability to fight without killing anyone." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had found a way to end the war without becoming part of it. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The human fleet would need to deploy these weapons across the entire theater of war simultaneously. If either side had time to adapt or react, the plan would fail. They needed to map every fleet, every base, every strategic position of both armies. They needed perfect timing and complete surprise. For another month, the stealth ships continued their mission, but now with a new purpose. They mapped jump points, patrol routes, and fleet positions. They studied command structures and communication patterns. They learned how both species thought and acted, not just as warriors, but as people trapped in an endless cycle of violence. In orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars, automated factories worked day and night, building the specialized weapons and delivery systems that would be needed. Each device was calibrated to the exact frequencies and gravitational patterns discovered in the labs. The humans were preparing for something unprecedented. Not a war of conquest or destruction, but a forced intervention for peace. As the preparations entered their final stages, Admiral White looked at the latest intelligence reports from the stealth fleet. The war had claimed another solar system, its planets cracked and its sun destabilized by the fighting. Time was running out. Soon, Humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy, not with a diplomatic greeting or a show of force, but with a demonstration of power unlike anything either side had seen before. The United Earth government's main chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every human colony and station crowded the circular room, their faces illuminated by the holographic display showing the full extent of the alien war. Admiral White stood at the center, her uniform crisp, and her expression grave as she addressed the assembly. "We have watched this war for 6 months," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We have seen 18 solar systems destroyed. We have counted billions of casualties on both sides, and we have found a way to stop it." The room erupted in whispers as she gestured to Dr. Miller and Dr. Cooper, who stepped forward with their latest test results. Dr. Miller activated a small device, and a crystal sample in a clear container began to pulse with light. Then, with a press of a button, the crystal froze, its internal patterns locked in perfect stasis. "Complete neural paralysis," she explained. "Temporary, harmless, but absolute. They won't be able to move, fight, or resist until we release them." Dr. Cooper's demonstration was equally impressive. A swirling cloud of test particles, similar to the cloud collective's form, spun in its containment field. Another button press, and the particles settled into a stable, calm pattern. "We can control their gravitational fields," he said. "Force them into a peaceful state without causing any damage to their consciousness." The debate that followed lasted 3 days. Some argued that humanity had no right to interfere in an alien war. Others pointed out that the conflict was spreading, that it would eventually reach Earth if left unchecked. The turning point came when Captain Reynolds shared his latest footage, a cloud collective nursery world being shattered by Bright One's weapons, and a crystal city being torn apart by gravitational forces in retaliation. "We can stop this," the captain's voice rang through the chamber. "Not just for us, but for them. They've forgotten how to do anything but fight. We can remind them that there's another way." His words struck a chord with the assembly. Humanity had spent its own history learning the cost of war. Now they had a chance to share that wisdom. The vote was nearly unanimous. Earth would intervene, not as a conqueror or an ally, but as a mediator with the power to enforce peace. The plan they developed was called Operation Starbreak, though some scientists had jokingly called it Timeout for Aliens. In orbit, the largest fleet humanity had ever built waited for its orders. 500 ships, each carrying the special devices developed by Miller and Cooper's teams. They were small vessels compared to the massive alien warships, but they didn't need to be big. They just needed to be fast and undetectable. Admiral White worked with military commanders to plan the deployment. The human fleet would split into 100 task forces, each responsible for a specific sector of the war zone. They would emerge from stealth simultaneously, activate their devices, and force both sides to stop fighting before either could react. The timing had to be perfect. The Bright Ones and the Cloud Collective had a pattern to their major offensives. Both sides would gather their forces for massive battles, trying to break the stalemate. The next such battle was predicted to occur in just 2 days. It would be the perfect moment to strike, when both armies were concentrated and vulnerable. In the final hours before launch, Admiral White visited the shipyards one last time. The fleet was ready, each ship equipped with both crystal freezing fields and gravity manipulators. The crews had trained for months in simulations, practicing their timing and coordination. Every possible scenario had been planned for, every contingency considered. As she looked at the assembled fleet, White thought about the responsibility they were taking on. Humanity was about to interfere in a war that had raged for longer than Earth had known about space travel. They were going to force 2 ancient, powerful species to stop fighting, to listen, to change. It was either the height of arrogance or the ultimate expression of compassion, perhaps both. The countdown began. Across the solar system, human ships prepared to jump to their assigned positions. In less than 48 hours, they would reveal themselves to the galaxy. And if everything went according to plan, They would end a 300-year war in less time than it took to watch a movie. The universe was about to learn that humanity had mastered more than just technology. They had mastered the art of forcing peace. The battle was about to begin. The Bright Ones had gathered their largest fleet in 50 years. 10,000 crystal ships arranged in a perfect geometric pattern that turned nearby space into a kaleidoscope of light. Facing them, the Cloud Collective had amassed an equally impressive force, their gaseous vessels swirling with deadly energy, ready to strike. Hidden in the darkness between the two armies, 500 human ships waited in perfect stealth. Captain Reynolds watched the final countdown on his display. His ship, the Silent Arrow, would coordinate the entire operation. Every human vessel had synchronized its clock to the microsecond. They would only get one chance at this. "All ships report ready," his communications officer whispered, though there was no need to be quiet in the vacuum of space. Old habits died hard when you were trying to be stealthy. The captain nodded, his eyes fixed on the timer. 3 minutes until the alien fleets would begin their attack. 2 minutes until humanity would make its move. The Bright Ones fired first. Their crystal ships lit up like newborn stars, energy building for a massive coordinated blast. The Cloud Collective's ships began their battle formation, spreading out into a vast net designed to absorb and redirect the incoming attack. Neither side noticed the slight distortions in space where human vessels waited. 30 seconds, Reynolds announced to his crew. Around him, technicians made final adjustments to their specialized weapons. The devices hummed softly, ready to broadcast the exact frequencies that would paralyze the crystal ships and the gravitational pulses that would calm the gaseous beings. 10 seconds. The first shots from the Bright Ones lanced across space, met by the Cloud Collective's counterattack. The battle that would have destroyed another solar system had begun. Execute. 500 human ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously. Before either alien fleet could register the new contacts, the humans activated their devices. The effect was immediate and stunning. The crystal ship's brilliant glow stuttered and dimmed, their perfect formations breaking apart as their crews found themselves unable to control their vessels. The Cloud Collective ships, caught in the focused gravitational fields, condensed into stable, peaceful forms. First wave successful, Reynolds reported, watching as his screen showed green confirmation lights from all sectors. Moving to Phase 2, the human fleet split up, each ship heading to its designated target. They had mapped every backup base, every hidden outpost, every reserve fleet of both sides. Nothing would be missed. In the Bright One's home system, their massive crystal cities received the same treatment. The inhabitants found themselves frozen in place, their consciousness intact, but their ability to fight completely neutralized. The Cloud Collective's colony worlds experienced similar effects, their swirling populations guided into a state of enforced calm. Admiral White, watching from her command ship near the main battle, allowed herself a small smile. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. The aliens' weapons were formidable, their defenses nearly perfect against each other, but they had never conceived of the simple, elegant solutions humanity had devised. An hour into the operation, the reports came in from all sectors. 95% of the Bright One's military capability had been neutralized. The Cloud Collective's forces were in a similar state. The few ships that had been out of range were being tracked and would be dealt with soon. The most remarkable thing was that there had been no casualties. Not a single life, crystalline or gaseous, had been lost. Humanity had achieved in 2 hours what neither side had managed in 3 centuries. Total victory. But this victory wasn't about destruction or dominance. It was about creating an opportunity for peace. As the human fleet maintained their position, keeping both alien forces in check, diplomatic ships emerged from stealth. They had been waiting for this moment, carrying teams of negotiators who had spent months studying both species' cultures and languages. It was time for the second phase of humanity's plan. Reynolds looked out at the battlefield that wasn't a battlefield anymore. The mighty fleets that had been about to tear each other apart were now floating peacefully, their weapons silent, their crews probably confused but very much alive. His ship's AI calculated that the energy that would have been expended in this one battle could have powered Earth for a year. "Send the message," Admiral White commanded. Throughout the war zone, on every frequency both species could receive, humanity's first official communication began to play. It was time to introduce themselves to their new neighbors, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers who had done what neither side thought possible, ended their endless war in just a few hours. The message played across every communication channel in both crystal and gaseous languages. The human diplomats had spent months perfecting the translations, making sure every word would be understood clearly. "We are humanity, from the planet Earth. We have stopped your war to prevent further destruction. We offer you peace and a chance to talk. We will release your people gradually as you show willingness to negotiate." The first response came from Commander Stone of the Bright Ones. His crystalline form, though partially paralyzed, still managed to transmit his thoughts. You stopped us all." "How?" "Our defenses were perfect." The disbelief in his voice was clear even through the translation matrix. Fleet Director Mist of the Cloud Collective responded next, her gaseous form swirling slowly in the controlled gravitational field. 3 centuries of war ended in 2 hours by a species we never knew existed. Either this is the most elaborate trick the Bright Ones have ever played, or we have much to learn from these humans. The human diplomatic vessel, Hope's Dawn, moved into position between the 2 frozen fleets. Inside, Ambassador Jack Thompson and his team prepared for the most important first contact in human history. They had chosen him for his calm demeanor and his ability to speak to both sides without appearing to favor either. "We will now demonstrate our good faith," Thompson announced. The human ships began a carefully controlled release of their effects. Small groups of ships from both sides found themselves able to move again, but their weapons remained offline thanks to targeted frequencies. It was enough mobility to show that the paralysis was temporary, but not enough to restart the fighting. The released ships from both sides did something unexpected. They moved closer to the human vessels, not to attack, but to observe. Curious crystal scanners and gaseous sensors examined the small Earth ships with obvious amazement. How had such tiny vessels managed to subdue their mighty fleets? Ambassador Thompson invited leaders from both sides to board the Hope's Dawn. The ship had been specially modified with 3 different environmental sections, one for each species. The Bright Ones needed their crystal-rich atmosphere, the Cloud Collective required their specific gravitational conditions, and the humans needed their own air. Through specially designed viewports, Commander Stone and Fleet Director Mist saw each other clearly for the first time without the filter of combat scanners. They also saw their first humans face to face. The contrast was striking. The humans looked so simple compared to living crystal or sentient gas, yet they had accomplished what seemed impossible. "Let us tell you what we've learned from watching your war," Thompson began. He showed them recordings from the stealth ships, the destruction, the endless cycle of attack and counterattack, the waste of resources and lives. But he also showed them something they hadn't seen in centuries: their worlds at peace from before the war. "Your war started over energy resources," Thompson continued. "But in 300 years of fighting, you've destroyed enough energy and resources to power both your civilizations for 1,000 years. We can show you how to share the nebula you fight over. We can teach you how to harvest energy more efficiently than either of you thought possible." The alien leaders watched in silence as humans displayed their understanding of crystal technology and gaseous physics. The Earth scientists had developed innovations that neither species had considered, too focused as they were on combat applications. Simple solutions that could end their resource conflicts forever. "Why?" Commander Stone asked, his crystal form flickering with confusion. "Why would you help us like this? What do you want in return?" Thompson smiled. "We want what both of you secretly want. Peace. We want neighbors who trade and share knowledge, not eternal war that threatens to spill into our region of space. We want to learn from you both, and yes, to teach you what we know." Fleet Director Mist's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully. "You could have conquered us both in our moment of weakness. Instead, you offer us a way forward together. Perhaps this is why you could see what we could not. You never saw us as enemies to be destroyed, but as potential friends to be helped." As the first day of negotiations drew to a close, more ships were carefully released from their paralysis. Not a single one attempted to restart the fighting. Instead, they began the enormous task of standing down from 3 centuries of war. The human fleet remained vigilant, ready to reactivate their devices if needed, but for the first time in 300 years, the stars were quiet. 1 year after humanity's intervention, the Orion Arm looked very different. Where massive fleets had once clashed in endless battle, joint research stations now orbited the contested nebulae. Crystal ships and gas clouds worked alongside small human vessels, testing new energy collection methods that would benefit all 3 species. The former command center of the Bright Ones had been transformed into a galactic cultural center. Commander Stone, now Ambassador Stone, stood in his crystal form before a group of young beings from all 3 species. Human children in environmental suits stared in wonder at his shimmering body, while young crystal formations and small gas clouds hovered nearby, equally fascinated. "The war," he explained, "taught us how to fight. The humans taught us how to listen." His crystalline structure glowed with different colors as he spoke, something that once would have been a battle display, but now served as a peaceful light show for his audience. In another part of the center, Fleet Director Mist had taken on the role of Chief Science Coordinator. Her gaseous form swirled excitedly as she worked with human scientists and crystal engineers on a new type of energy collector. The design combined the Bright One's light-focusing abilities, the Cloud Collective's gas manipulation, and human innovation. Together, they had already achieved efficiency levels that would have seemed impossible during the war. The United Earth government had kept its promise. All paralyzing effects had been lifted within 6 months, once stable peace treaties were in place. But something unexpected had happened. Both alien species had asked to keep some of the human technology, not as weapons, but as tools. The crystal freezing frequencies were now used in Bright One's medical procedures, while the gravitational stabilizers helped Cloud Collective ships navigate difficult space conditions. Admiral White stood on the observation deck of her new ship, watching a remarkable sight. A Bright One's crystal city was being repaired, but not just by its own kind. Cloud Collective engineers used their gaseous nature to reach difficult spots, while human construction crews provided precision work that neither species could manage. The same scene played out across the former war zone. 3 species working together, each contributing their unique strengths. The changes went beyond technology and construction. The 3 species had begun to understand each other in ways that seemed impossible before. Humans learned to read crystal light patterns and gas density shifts as easily as facial expressions. The Bright Ones developed an appreciation for human art, fascinated by how such simple beings could create such complex beauty. The Cloud Collective discovered they had a natural talent for human music, their gaseous forms creating sounds no physical instrument could match. Captain Reynolds, now retired from military service, had taken up teaching at the newly established Tri-Species Academy. His favorite lecture was about the day the war ended, but not for the reasons most expected. The real victory, he would tell his mixed audience of human, crystal, and gas students, wasn't in stopping the war. It was in showing that there's always another way to see things, if you're willing to look. The academy itself was a marvel of cooperation. Each classroom could adjust its environment instantly to suit any of the 3 species. Students learned not just about technology and science, but about each other's cultures, histories, and ways of thinking. The war was studied too, but as a lesson in how misunderstanding and pride could blind even the most advanced civilizations. Dr. Miller and Dr. Cooper had continued their research, but with a different focus. Working with both alien species, they developed new technologies that combined the best aspects of all 3 civilizations. Their latest project was a ship that could serve as a true home for all three species, allowing them to explore the galaxy together. As the first anniversary of peace approached, representatives from all three species gathered in orbit around a newly restored star system. Where once there had been destruction, now there was life. Crystal cities sparkled in the starlight, their spires intertwined with cloud collective habitats, while human stations floated nearby. Children of all three species played together in specially designed parks, their laughter and joy needing no translation. Ambassador Thompson, watching the celebration from the Hope's dawn, smiled as he read the latest reports. Trade was flourishing, scientific breakthroughs were happening daily, and there hadn't been a single violent incident between the species in months. A crystal child waved at him with a shimmering appendage, while a young gas form danced patterns in the air. Nearby, a human child tried to imitate both, giggling in her environmental suit. The war that had raged for 3 centuries had ended in hours, but the peace that followed had created something far more valuable. A future where different species could look at each other and see not enemies, but friends they hadn't met yet. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter in this new age of understanding.